Okay, hi everyone. I'm Jessica Jacobs. I'm a producer and I've been around the block. I've worked at studios, production companies, management companies. I've produced shorts and features, and now I'm an independent producer. And I guess I like to say that I'm always looking for, it's kind of cliche, but indie darlings. Projects that are character driven. I love A24. I love, stories that aren't, haven't been told a billion times, or if the premise is familiar, I always look towards like what's the perspective that might be a little bit different about this story that we've seen before. So that's just a little bit about me. Born and raised in Los Angeles, went to LMU Film School. Yeah, so that's a little bit about my background. And now I'm going to try and share my screen. Okay, let's see if this works. Okay, can everyone see this? Hopefully, great. Okay. So how to keep readers reading. And I was able to pick this topic, and I picked it because every time I have a general with a writer, they always ask me for feedback about their notes, but I usually get, and same with interns that I've had too, what is it? Like, what's that secret, or what makes you keep reading? And I'll go over a lot of this, but for me, it's always, you know, why should I care? Which sounds kind of, bitchy and annoying, but it's just the truth. What about this story? Like I said earlier, what is different about it? What makes it distinct? If it's a familiar premise, or if it's a familiar character, what is it? So that's one of the many things. And just a little bit about my background. So I went to LMU Film School, studied film and television production. Then I worked at Echo Lake Entertainment. When I was at Echo Lake as an assistant, I got into a film independent producing lab. So I produced shorts while I was an assistant. Don't necessarily recommend it. It's very hard to keep track of a job and producing shorts, but I did it, and I'm really thankful for those experiences. Then I worked at Studio 8, which is Jeff Robinov's company. It was a mini, major studio at the time. Now it's a production company. Then I moved over to Paul Schiff Productions, where I made Netflix films in Winnipeg in Canada. One of them was Fractured, which I produced. It's available on Netflix, a little self-promotion. And then I worked at Artillery Creative, which is a management and production company. And then today I'm an independent producer, and I told you, a little bit about what I look for and the kind of material that I gravitate towards. But yeah, that's kind of where I've been, and I'll take you through, further things that I look for. So personal touch. Kind of comically, I put in this picture of a stack of scripts, but the whole point I put that in is because that's the truth. That's literally, producers, execs, that's what their staff looks like. Most of the time, people read now on iPads, but some people, do still print scripts, and the piles are sky high. My own queue, I think I have 20, for better or worse, scripts, books, articles, short stories, book proposals to get through that I owe people, responses on, that I'm either considering for my own slate of projects, or, I told a friend I would give them notes. So it's constant reading, and that's kind of one thing that I'll be talking about. But yeah, there's lots of scripts. So when I say personal touch, before I start reading, what I look for is, what's the concept? Even before like page one, I'm curious, is it up my alley? What's the genre? And is there an emotional component? Hopefully there is. But that's something that I personally, not everyone looks for, like really, really well-rounded relationships or characters, but that's something that I am kind of a stickler about, because, in real life, what is life if not to share it with someone or have experiences with people? So I look for those emotional components that draw you in. And again, is it up my alley? I'll probably say that a few times. And who would I pitch this or something like this to from my contacts. So again, before I read, if I'm looking at a log line, I automatically, now that I'm independent, my wheels start turning and saying, oh, is this a sports movie? Is this a rom-com? Who's making those right now? And who do I know of that's looking for something like X before I start? What's fresh about the premise, if anything? We'll go into that more, but that one is really tried and true. If there's anything that makes this stand out, I'm already intrigued, because I think there's a quote, there's only 10 original stories, but it's about how and what perspective you tell it from. So what is fresh about the premise, and who is this for? Would my parents see it? Would someone in Missouri see it? Would someone, internationally see it? Who is this for? Does it hit 4 quadrants, or is it just, a festival movie? Who knows? So that's something that I think of as well. And character, which we'll talk tons about, but character is really, what I'm personally, gravitating towards and attracted to. So moving on, things to take into consideration. So I mentioned this before, and I'll probably say it a few times, but people are very, very busy. In Hollywood, it's a grind, always reading. And when you're reading, you're hopefully also in production on something. With COVID, it's a bit different right now, but you don't have like an easy life being an executive or a producer. You're always juggling a billion different things. So as I say here, the person that you want reading your script is usually filled with burnout. So if you're sending someone a script, it's very rare that they only have one thing to read and it's yours. So, and like I say, the person you want reading is usually super busy, which means, they're making things. And in order for someone to be captivated and moved, in my opinion, your script needs to be well written. So when I say well written, I don't just mean like I can see your voice through clearly, I can, understand what's going on, but I really also mean typos, because if there's one or two, no one's going to kill you, but if there's multiple typos, execs do bump on those small things. So if there's a grammar issue, like that's kind of a sign of like, okay, this person didn't take the time to really make this professional. Why should I take the time to read it? Feel distinguishable, have one fresh thing about it, which we'll talk a little bit more later. Well thought out. So, with drama, no matter the genre. So when I say well thought out, I mean, did you just write this in a weekend, or how much time did you put into it? And it's not necessarily time equals success, but it's more so you thought clearly through every plot hole. You thought, this is what I want to say. You knew every single time that you were challenged by notes, like how to get the best version of this executed. And then with drama, what I mean is so many projects. Some writers, they might get defensive and say something like, well, it's a comedy, it doesn't need to have drama. But sometimes, most times, the best comedies are built from a dramatic situation. So one example that I go to is Forgetting Sarah Marshall. Jason Segel, he gets completely blindsided. He's naked. It's a funny scene. And then his girlfriend breaks up with him and she was cheating on him. So his whole life is crumbling. So had it not been executed the way it was, like that's a really dramatic moment in someone's life that potentially could lead to depression, like that's a real moment, but it's hysterical. But so everything, whatever genre, you should have drama in there. Read your script out loud. So, and this isn't always, like, some people disagree with this, and I'm not saying every single page, but I'm taking this note from Aaron Sorkin's book of reading your script out loud. And it's obviously exhausting. You could lose your voice if you do it all in one sitting. But if you take the time, let's say, today you read the first 1 to 30 pages out loud, you will hear, what the characters sound like. You will also, I suggest this because you might bump on things in terms of flow, making things sound seamless, or if certain sentences don't, the run-on sentences, they're not clear, you will hear those things easier when you read them out loud versus just reading it in your head. So what you bump on while you're reading is also what readers bump on while they're reading. Your action descriptions need to flow. So I look for these things, and I'm telling all these things now because I'll touch on these things later. But action descriptions, while I love like really, really impressive writing, it's really clarity and information that I'm looking for. And it can't be like, now's not the time, for you to write your most beautiful prose. Now's the time to get out what you're trying to say to advance the story. So there needs to be flow. There needs to be like a succinct quality without, overdoing the fluffiness of it all. And one book that is really good, it's not a screenwriting book, but it's a writing book. It's called On Writing Well by William Zinsser. And it's a book that basically teaches you the very fundamentals of how to write well, compelling, clear, how to make sentences sound good and also get points across. So I would recommend that book just from a writer's standpoint. And, even if you're only interested in screenwriting, you need to be a good writer, a good enough writer to sell your script. So I think that's a good, just standard book to, recommend. So personal touch, and I'll talk a lot about this through this webinar, but as a writer, what I'm looking for is, before you start writing, or if you've already started writing, maybe you're on your second draft of your feature or pilot or whatever, you need to figure out, why do you need to tell this story? And that's something that not everyone knows, and it's very clear at the pitching stage, or sometimes even when you're making a movie, you can kind of figure out that like, not everyone understands why this writer went through this experience and needs to tell this story. Hopefully they know when you're filming day one, but it's a really great question, and you need to ask yourself, why do I need to tell this? Why am I the person? That also leans itself to, what about your point of view makes you the perfect person to tell this story? So, why couldn't your friend's point of view be just as good, for this specific story? Those are questions that you want to ask yourself, because it will make the writing process so much easier, probably more fun, and it shows when there's this level of thought and commitment into making a project succeed. What are you trying to say? That's, one of the most important things. While it's redundant, I'm sure, and you've heard it, you really need to figure this out, because if you don't know what you're trying to say, then that's literally, that will come across so much when someone's reading it, because they'll be like, what is this even about? What themes keep you coming back to this project? So when I talk to writers or give, friends notes, like, you're going to be spending years on whatever project you're working on right now. If you really are committed, you're going to be spending years on it. Some people sell their scripts in, 10 months, 10 years. Who knows? It's really a matter of what draws you to this project, and what themes are you constantly coming back to when you're, going to sleep at night, when you're in your shower. Like, what themes do you think are really important? What about your own experiences? If you're telling a story about love, what about your own experiences draw you to that theme to keep going and to really persevere through this long process of writing and then rewriting and selling your script? Why does this story make sense for the current landscape or the current time period? So, for example, a lot of people right now, they're looking for smaller projects that are lower in budget, only have a couple locations. Maybe it's not the best time to write like a humongous, huge sci-fi movie, because after COVID, I don't know how that's going to get into the end zone if there's 1,000, extras, let's say, in this kind of environment. So the current landscape is really important to just take into account. And this one, not everyone agrees with, which is totally fine, but I really like to, wonder before I read something, or after, while I'm, producing something, how similar are you, the writer, to the protagonist? because you're always going to want to find some type of similarity or entry point to the character that you're writing about. So if, you know, you're basing a story off of your best friend, like lean into that, have your best friend, you know, really be in that protagonist or that supporting role or what have you, because the more authentic your story is, the more authentic it will really show on the page and people will keep reading. So I've used Bo Burnham's 8th Grade as an example. Has everyone seen 8th Grade? Anyone? You could raise your hand. I don't even know if I can see everyone, but hopefully you have. Awesome. Okay. Great. So wow, lots of 8th grade fans. Awesome. So I used this as an example because Bo Burnham, before he was a writer and director, he made YouTube videos. He was hysterical and creative and thoughtful, and he used his experience as one of the first real like YouTube stars to make something that spoke about the internet and being young and being, you know, filled with anxiety. So I'll just quote this article that he did an interview for a magazine, and he said, instead of talking about the internet on the internet's terms, I wanted to talk about the part of the internet that gets excluded from the conversation, which is quiet, subtle, scared, nervous people. So he really took his own life experience and he looked at his own point of view, like I mentioned, and put it into this script in the form of a girl facing, you know, every normal trial and tribulation when you're in 8th grade. Okay, so now we're going to talk about log lines. And I know you're probably wondering, like, well, what are you looking for while reading? But this is all very important because all of these elements, whether you know it or not, are part of someone evaluating you as a writer and when, you know, your script is in their very large queue. So in a log line, I look for what is the meat, like who should care and what is this really going to be about? Why am I spending 2 hours plus reading a script? It is the elevator pitch and it captures the essence of your story in 1 to 2 sentences. And it should also give a hint or some type of idea of what genre it's going to be without saying it's a drama or it's a period piece. And the way I like to frame it is characters want or have to do X, but Y stands in their way. Or something dramatic happens to character and character must do X. So it's acting, reacting. It's all about the obstacle and the character. So I'm gonna point to some examples. When a woman finds a time machine in a downtown Manhattan nail salon, she uses it to keep traveling back in time 24 hours to make her previous night's date perfect. So I like this log line. Does anyone in the chat want to share any like feedback or first impressions about why this log line works? Anyone? I don't know if I could see everything actually. No.
Can you see the chat below?
I don't think so because I'm in full screen. Let's see. It's okay.
I'm in full screen and I don't see any.
Oh, there we go. Okay. It's relatable to fantasy, immediate. Yeah, love it. Awesome. Perfect. Okay, so I agree with all of those comments. And just so you guys know, because I think it's really helpful to be, oh, the stakes seem light. That's interesting. Yeah, I agree with all of these things. So I'll tell you my, just immediate reaction. So this is a script that I've read that has been sold. It's in development. And it's a rom-com. It's a fine script. There's nothing, I'm not here to say anything negative about the script, but what I will say is that this concept has been done a billion times. And I read the script because I knew the writer, but I passed on it because we've seen it a bunch. So while it has a good log line, what I'm evaluating is there's nothing really fresh about this, just personally. The next one is a teen witnesses the fatal shooting of her childhood best friend at the hands of a police officer. Facing pressure from all sides of the community, she must find her voice and stand up for what's right. Does anyone know where this log line is from? It's actually from something. Anyone? So it's from The Hate U Give, which that's a movie that I really like. And the log line immediately, you know, intrigues me because it's all drama. And it's also, you know, we get a hint of maybe what the genre is. We know that it centers around someone who's probably younger, pressure, race. There's complex issues here. So I'm already leaning in and I'm excited to read this script. A paraplegic Marine dispatched to the moon Pandora on a unique mission becomes torn between following his orders and protecting the world he feels is his home. Does anyone know what this is from? Yeah, nice, awesome. Harker got it. Yes, so this is Avatar. And again, genre, character, he's torn. There's already conflict. Like it's a no-brainer that this script will have something pulling me in. There's obstacles already in this. It's a mission, you know, so you're already understanding what this is. And then because we'll be looking at this movie 8th grade, 13-year-old Kayla makes her way through the last week of middle school, the end of her thus far disastrous 8th grade year before she begins with school. So 8th grade is one of those kind of gems that I tell people, like, there's no reason really why this movie should have gotten made from just like an executive's point of view. The title says what it is. It's not exactly, you know, the most like, it's not that there's like action packed. It's that there's an emotional component. The character is super relatable. Everyone's been in 8th grade. Everyone can relate to that anxious time, aspiring to fit in, aspiring to be cool, aspiring to have your first boyfriend or girlfriend. So the thing about this log line that I lean into is that the word disastrous, like, even though there's something so mundane, 8th grade, middle school, this experience, something tells me that there's going to be a comedic element or it's going to go terribly wrong. And I'm in for that. Like, I'm already hooked because something really palpable that went absolutely wrong is going to happen. And I'm curious, like, I'm already very curious. So those are, you know, just a little bit about log lines. So now we're going to look at the first 10 pages, which every single person, you know, that I give advice to is like, what do you look for? So make your first scene count. It's as easy as that. When you're writing a first scene, when I'm reading, I'm tired. I'm, like I said, and I'm going to capitalize on this because it's just the truth. I'm already exhausted. So you need to really draw us in. We want to know who the protagonist is. Who are we going to be spending an hour and a half, 2 hours, sometimes 3 if you're taking really, you know, extensive notes. Who are we going to be meeting? And then who are we going to be spending so much time with? What are they doing and why is the action amusing or engaging? What really, you know, makes us flip the page? What's going on? Do we get a hint of what they want or what's standing in their way? So even if it's not, you know, the inciting incident, I'm curious, like, what does the person that we're spending this much time with, what do they want? What is this about? And if we don't meet the protagonist, there better be like a foolproof reason, because if you're just wasting time or pages or scenes, then you kind of already lost me. I need to know what is the point? Who are we going to care about and why are we going to care? And what does your opening scene lead to? So, you know, if it's someone on a boat and someone goes overboard, I'm curious, and where does that go and how does that transpire? But if it's, you know, let's say that same scenario, but you have literally 10 pages of a character getting ready on a cruise ship, like, you lost me because who wants to watch something like that? Unless like the big action, you know, where the conflict is in their room and someone gets murdered right next to them. So then also, where are we, and what world will we be living in for 2 hours? If we don't know this, it's very hard to orient ourselves. So that's also, you know, just going on clarity. Be direct, be clear. You know, like I said, with that, maybe that's a bad example of a cruise ship, but you definitely need to be clear, and you need to tell us without, you know, hitting us over the head, where we are, who we're with, what's the action. Okay, so here are a few opening shots of some movies I love. You have Moonlight, you have Get Out, Pursuit of Happiness, Edge of 17, Whiplash. And the best example here that I can reference is Get Out. So the opening is not on the protagonist, but there's a very specific reason why we're not with him, you know, on the first 5 minutes of the film. And that's because it's foreshadowing the big conflict. It's teasing what this movie is about. It's also, it's very mysterious, and we're really intrigued. What just happened? Why are we then going somewhere else? And there's even a tonal shift after the first scene. So Jordan Peele gets away with it because there's a real reason, and it's foreshadowing this horrible nightmare of an experience of walking down the street and getting captured. So now we're going to look at 8th grade. And I'm going to read like half of the first page, and you'll understand why as I go on. Hold on, let me just move these windows. Okay, so interior bedroom night. A young girl sits at the desk beside her bed. This is Kayla, 13, tiny. So we got it. She was a 13-year-old. She's tiny. She's in a room. She fixes her hair in the mirror of her webcam's feed, which broadcasts on the bright screen of the laptop in front of her. A strand of hair falls out of place. She huffs and fixes it, turns her head, checks her face from all sides, winces, satisfied in quotations. She takes a deep breath. So I love all of this, and I'm already completely in a different world. I'm not in my room reading. I'm in this script. I'm in her room, and I'm curious why, you know, why is she not really satisfied with, you know, the way that she is? Her hair's out of place. She takes a deep breath, hits the space bar, and snaps into an affected brightness, speaking to her laptop's built-in webcam. Kayla, hey guys, it's Kayla with back another video. So as you can see, and you can kind of look at this as I'm talking, this girl's insecure, and that's blatantly clear. There's no question about it. And automatically, whether you realize why you like it or not, you relate to her, because who's super confident when they're 13 and tiny and their hair's out of place? And in her monologue, she says, I want to talk to you guys today about being yourself. What does that mean? Like, aren't I always being myself? So you already know that she's trying to fit in. She's trying to sell herself somewhat, you know, on the internet, telling a story, trying to get fans. Why else, you know, do you make this video about being yourself? She's figuring out her place in the world, whether she knows it or not. And that's really relatable. It's intriguing. And the action is she's trying to get something right that's already going wrong. Let's see. Okay. So in the first half of page 1 in this script, we know who the protagonist is, or we meet the protagonist. We know the genre, or we get a hint of it, like I mentioned. Tone, what she wants. There's an emotional component because she's messing up and she's aware she's messing up. So we kind of have this empathy for her because that's our access point to, you know, relating to her. Everyone has a loose hair. Everyone's insecure at that age. And then to me, this has the put everything else down effect, because in my opinion, this script, it's succinct, it's clear, the writing's really strong, and I want to know who this girl is. Like, I maybe was a little bit like this girl, so I'm leaning in, I'm not looking at my phone. It's 2020, everyone's very addicted to technology, including myself. I'm not playing Words with Friends in between reading, I'm not on Instagram, I'm fully in the script, and that's a great thing. So things I look for past page 10. So once you've made it, honestly, congratulations, because pages 1 through 10 are very important. People say it, but it's just true, because like I mentioned, the person that you want reading has a lot of other crap to do. So what I'm looking for is escalation. So is anything going anywhere? Are we staying still, or is the drama just heightening? Are things getting gradually, whether it's a comedy or drama, is the drama increasing? Are we learning the stakes? Are we getting more attached? Are we intrigued by the character or the setting? How do we, keep going? And then, as I said, emotional component, relationships, tension, drama, themes, all of those things are incredibly important. And I always, it's kind of funny that I do this, but I always compare, whether it's jobs or the industry in general, and making movies, to relationships, because just like a new relationship, we should want to spend more time with the protagonist. We should want to, be intrigued about the setting, or be intrigued about their journey. So give the information and intrigue us, but don't hit us over the head with it, and don't be redundant in each scene, but give just enough that we're like, oh, that's really interesting. I wonder if that's going to come back here. Like, you want someone who's reading to just be totally in that script and not elsewhere. And again, clarity, simplicity. If I'm confused and then I have to reread it, sometimes that happens, it's totally fine. But if I have to keep rereading sentences or pages or starting over, you've already lost me. And the honest truth is that people skim like you will never even believe it. And you really want people to read every single word. So be clear. Clarity, if anything, like if you're having trouble getting out your first draft, just write, the action, what's actually happening, and don't fluff it up. Just be clear. And then, try and add in, those elements maybe later. But clarity is super important. And I think people don't talk about that enough. And like Get Out, if you go away from the protagonist, we need to understand why you've drifted. There needs to be a substantial reason why you're not with them. And then in terms of character, we want to empathize with them. We should care about them. Everything that they do, we should be behind them. Or if it's, an anti-hero, what's the access point of that empathy? Why do we care? And relatability, like 8th grade, that character's super relatable. And then in terms of, past page 10, I'm also looking for new information. What's the drama? What are the setbacks? And then the biggest thing is that the character should be doing everything to get to their goal. And you as the writer should be pushing them down and down each time. Each obstacle should be bigger than the next. And we should feel the failure, so that when they win, it's totally earned. And that win feels even better than it would if they just got it easily. So through all of this, we're planting the theme, and we're really staying with this story. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about structure and scene work. So I'm borrowing from Aaron Sorkin, but Act 1 is you chase your hero up a tree. Act 2, you throw rocks at them, and then you throw more rocks at them. And then Act 3, you get them down the tree or not. If you don't get them down, they die trying. So we'll talk about this more. And obviously, structure isn't just this easy, but it's really what I said about having those obstacles be tangible, and presenting a character that we care about that's going for that want, that goal, that need, and then X standing in their way of getting Y. So scene work. Scenes are not, it's not that it's complicated to write a good scene. However, it's complicated not to overwrite a good scene. So scenes give us information that move the story forward. So you really need to think, okay, how do I get in and out of this scene? And what am I saying in however many pages you're taking to write a scene? If it's a big action scene, it's going to be longer. If there are set pieces, it's going to be longer. But it's really just getting in and out and evoking whatever needs to happen at that point to move the story forward. If it's not moving it forward, it should be cut. And then present the protagonist with new obstacles that heighten the stakes. And like real life, and I talked about this earlier, but there needs to be constant obstacles, and every obstacle should be exponentially more difficult than the last. And the character's pushing towards their goal, but the obstacle is pushing them down. Okay, so I'm going to show this scene where I'll explain it after, actually, but hopefully you've seen 8th grade, because I guess spoiler alert.
I could take my shirt off. I mean, that's stupid, though. Is that stupid?
No.
No?
That's fine.
Fuck, I feel like a fucking idiot.
No,
Is it fine if I take my shirt off? Yeah? Okay. I don't know. All right. Gotta do it. Truth or dare?
Truth.
You're no fun.
Sorry. Okay, well, dare.
Take your shirt off.
I'm not, like, super comfortable with that.
Well, do you think I'm comfortable right now? Calm down, relax. Take a deep breath. Come on. Take your shirt off.
No! Sorry. I'm really sorry.
Fine.
Sorry.
Stop saying you're sorry. I said it was fine, dude, okay? So stop saying that, okay? You know, and now you're gonna have your first hookup with some asshole at a party, and you're not gonna be good at it, and he's gonna tell all his friends about it, and you're gonna get made fun of and feel like shit. Do you want that?
No.
This was about you, okay? I'm trying. I was trying to help you, okay?
I know. I really appreciate it. I just... I sorry. I mean, it was just... It was a lot at once, you know. I don't know. I didn't want to do that right now. Please don't tell Olivia about this.
Okay, so what is everyone's reactions to that scene? And then I'll explain why I picked that one. But if we could just type in the chat, you know, what you got from that scene, how it made you feel, and you know what the conflict maybe was, and why it was anxious. Great, me too. I think we all can relate. Yep. And comfortable, anxious. Anyone else? Awkward. Plants a seed. Love that. Yes. Yep. Exactly. Made me feel all insecure all over again. Beginning, middle, and end. Subtext. Totally. Yeah. Love it. These are all awesome. Great. Okay. So. Okay, so now I'm going to play a scene that happens after that scene happened, and we'll talk a little bit about what you guys are feeling about the scene, etc. And then I'll explain why both of these scenes mean something and are kind of illustrating what we're talking about here with scene work.
Wow.
Thank you. Would you like to take a seat?
Oh, sure.
You like chicken nuggets, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I got a 20 piece, and I also got 2 of every kind of sauce. But if you have a favorite sauce and want the one packet of it, you can have mine. I like all the sauces equal.
Thanks.
Yeah. Oh, and the nuggets have been sitting out for a little bit because I didn't know when you'd be here. So just tell me if they're too cold, and I can heat them up in the microwave over there. Okay.
Okay.
Whoops, sorry. Left this out by accident. Sorry, I'm so stupid.
No problem.
You want to see it? No, wait. No, it's stupid.
Sure.
Okay. Yeah.
What is it?
Oh, well, I go to archery camp every summer, and last summer I got 5 bullseyes in a day, so, they gave me the Sharpshooter of the Week award.
That's actually really cool.
Not really. It's stupid.
I didn't think it's really cool, but yeah.
Nah, well, I think it's stupid. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, to our first friend hangout, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you believe in God?
Yes.
Okay, cool. You like the silverware?
Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah, it's a lightsaber. Check it out. I've seen some of your videos.
Oh, those are really dumb.
No. They're actually really cool. I love those videos. You're really smart about stuff. Like a lot of things.
Thanks.
I was thinking you can maybe have like your own talk show or something.
Yeah.
Am I being weird at all to you? Like
No.
Yeah, I'm okay. Good.
You're fine.
I'm just nervous. Yeah.
No, it's fine. I am.
Yeah.
Yeah. Am I being quiet or too
No
like?
way.
Okay. Am
You've
I
been
talking enough?
You've been pretty talkative, but not in like an
Okay.
annoying way. Just responding to me. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah.
This is a good conversation, don't you think?
Yeah. We're doing some good talking.
Yeah, it's a nice chat.
Yeah.
You would go great with this.
Some
Szechuan sauce.
You like Rick and Morty too?
Yes.
Nice.
Yes, Morty. Szechuan sauce, Morty. We gotta get it, Morty. Come on, Morty. Come on.
Oh,
No,
geez,
Jerry,
Rick.
shut up, Morty. Yes.
Rick, I don't know.
Yes,
So
Morty. Keep doing the voice, Morty. Yes, of course. That show's amazing.
Yeah.
You are awesome. You're amazing. No problem.
Okay. I love that scene so much. So any thoughts or just reactions, like what you took away from the scene, maybe how it contrasted from the scene before, anything like that? Sweetly awkward, totally. Sitting at opposite sides of the table. We've all been there before. Any other impressions or I can't tell if he's being genuine. He's not a dick, so they're just bumbling through like we all do. Perfect. He's trying to cater to her, selfless. Yep. Didn't seem contrived, flowed naturally, elaborates on character. Bingo. Totally different feelings in the last scene. There was a sweet vulnerability. Love this. You guys are really getting it. Reinforces seem more subtle about shyness and interest versus still maybe not being ready for sex. Yep. Awesome. Okay, so bonding as the scene goes on. Exactly. There's that emotional component. Awesome. Okay, so the reason we just talked about that. I love how they interrupt each other. Me too. It really builds on that awkwardness and just not knowing what to do or what to say when you're that age, because everyone's been there. Everyone remembers like their first not really date with someone that, you know, they find, you know, attractive, and that awkwardness of it compared to the last scene where she can't take action and take the dare. This time she still is having trouble connecting, but she finally does connect. Exactly. So one of her goals, you know, is to, she doesn't ever say it, but we know because everyone's been at that age. Of course you want a significant other while you're going into high school. Everyone wants that. It's a status thing, you know. Oh, I've gone on dates. My boyfriend has a car. Like everyone wants those things at that age. And she just wants to fit in and be confident. But in this movie, she has trouble doing that. So the reason why I showed those scenes back to back is to juxtapose how great it feels when she finally gets like some type of relief. Even though she's awkward and even though she's anxious, you feel almost relieved that this experience is happening because it's a win. Whether you might think it is or not, it's a win for her character because she's able to be herself. She's told she's awesome, and she even meets someone who kind of is on the same page with her. He talks about his archery achievements. Like, I think that's a perfect scene to juxtapose. And it also shows we as a reader and we as a viewer, we feel like we've won because seeing her loss with that guy Riley in the car where she's totally, you know, feels uncomfortable, feels like a failure. Now we feel that this win is the biggest win because of that loss before. And if we didn't have the scene before where she's pressured and asked to make out with this guy, we wouldn't feel this happy for this really awkward like dinner with McDonald's chicken nuggets. But we do because we saw that she started somewhere else and now she's here, and she was bold enough to say yes to hanging out. So that's personal growth. That's a growth for the story. The story's going somewhere. Is everyone, you know, does this all make sense to everyone? Total win. Yes. Awesome. Okay. Great. Crystal. Awesome. Okay. So, as Elaine May said, the best scenes are negotiations, fights, and seduction. So I'll be totally honest in saying not every scene is. In real movies, you know, not everything is. Sometimes, like I've been saying, it's information. Sometimes you need to funnel information and it's taking place in a scene. But I do believe that the best scenes are if it's a negotiation where two people are at a standstill and they're trying to figure out who's going to budge and how does one person get what they want, or it's a fight and there's total conflict in the drama, or it's a seduction where someone is trying to get something and they're using whatever powers or tools they have in their toolbox as character to get what they want. So it might be worth revisiting in your own script. Is your scene one of these things? And I also like to say, if we had to summarize a scene, and this is all about information that moves the story forward, could we summarize it in one sentence? In this scene, for instance, Kayla says yes to hanging out with the guy, and although she's nervous, she's able to open up a little bit, and she gains acceptance, validation, and admiration from someone new. And that's the scene. And it's beautiful in a very awkward, uncomfortable, like it makes you feel uncomfortable because it is an uncomfortable dinner, but it's still a very sweet moment of awkwardness. And then how do the scenes or the beats make us feel? You know, in the scene with Riley, for instance, we feel like we need to get the hell out of that car. I mean, that's how I felt when I watched it. It's a very uncomfortable moment. And, you know, as a woman, I think everyone at that age has been pressured to do truth or dare. And I don't know about you guys, but I was always the person that said truth at first, like 5 times, and then finally said dare. Like, everyone can relate somehow. Hopefully you're relating to her and not him, but you can relate to that really awkward moment of kissing someone for the first time. And that scene just takes us back. On the page, it takes us back. In the movie, we remember our own, perhaps. So it should make you feel something. And we just talked about, you know, the differences in that scene and the characters losing. So it should make, when a character loses, we should care about them more and care about their goal. And when a character wins, we feel like we've won because it's earned. So we really win if and only if that win is really, really earned. And in this case, it is, because she had to go through that terrible experience in the car to then, you know, get to that dinner and have a moment of connection. So this is The Graduate, and this scene, well, we can talk about what it is. It's pretty clear to me, but we'll talk about if it's a negotiation, a scene, or a fight, or a combination of one of the three, or two of the three.
It's here in Elaine's room.
Elaine certainly is an attractive girl, isn't she? I don't remember hers having brown eyes.
Benjamin,
Yes.
you come over here a minute.
Over there?
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Will you unzip my dress? I think I'll go to bed.
Oh, well, good night.
Won't you unzip my dress?
I'd rather not, Mrs. Robinson.
If you still think I'm trying to seduce you.
No, I don't, but I just feel a little funny.
Benjamin, you've known me all your life.
I know that, but I'm just...
Come on, it's hard for me to reach. Thank you. What are you so scared of?
I'm not scared, Mrs. Robinson.
Then why do you keep running away?
Because you're going to bed. I don't think I should be up here.
Haven't you ever seen anybody in a slip before?
Yes, I have, but I just... Look, what if Mr. Robinson walked in right now?
What if he did?
Well, it would look pretty funny, wouldn't it?
Don't you think he trusts us together?
Of course he does, but he might get the wrong idea. Anyone might.
I don't see why. I'm twice as old as you are. How could anyone think that?
But they would, don't you see?
Benjamin, I am not trying to seduce you.
I know that, but please, Mrs. Robinson, this is difficult.
Would you like me to seduce you?
What?
Is that what you're trying to tell me?
I'm going home now. I apologize for what I said. I hope you can forget it, but I'm going home right now.
Benjamin,
Yes?
will you bring up my purse before you go?
I have to go now. I'm sorry.
I really don't want to put this on again. Won't you bring it up?
Where is it?
On the table in the hall.
Mrs. Robinson?
I'm in the bathroom.
Well, here's the purse.
Could you bring it up?
Well, I'll hand it to you. Come to the railing and I'll hand it up.
Benjamin, I'm getting pretty tired of all this suspicion. Now, if you won't do me a simple favor, I don't know what.
I'm putting it on the top step.
For God's sake, Benjamin, will you stop acting this way and bring me the purse?
I'm putting it here by the door.
Will you bring it in to me?
I'd rather not.
All right. Put it in Elaine's room where we were.
Right. Oh, God.
Okay. So reactions, impressions, and if you want, you can type in if you think it's a seduction, a negotiation, a fight, or impressions really is what I'm looking for. What you got from the scene, how it made you feel, that kind of thing. Seduction and negotiation, both. I think it's more of a negotiation than seduction. Manipulation, fight, interesting. Okay. Very boss lady. Negotiation. Okay, so in my opinion, it's a boy's dream. In my opinion, it's a negotiation and a seduction. Yeah, Noreen just said that as well. So it's a seduction because she's literally seducing him. There's even a line that says, she says, "Do you want me to seduce you?" while she's seducing him. And it's a negotiation because he's saying, I don't feel comfortable with this. I'm going to put it on the stairs. So he's leveling with her. I'm not going to do what you just asked, but I will do this. So that's the combination. And if you've seen this movie, hopefully, you know that where it leads. But if, he ran out the door and then she hit him with a rock or, something like that, that would be a fight. But there's this push and pull of negotiation and seduction. Staircase is a good metaphor. Yeah, because there's different levels. So he's trying to go down, she's pulling him up. Like it's really it's pretty clear. And for me, it makes me feel tense. It makes me question why she's doing this. And from a reader's perspective in the scene, I would be like, I think I know where this is going, but is it going where it's going? So that's kind of what I've been trying to point out. And he's just trying to get out of there. But in this moment, it's a seduction, and as a reader, you're seduced because you think you know where it's going, but in fact, the whole story goes a little bit somewhere else. Okay, so what I look for overall. So at different jobs I've had, different different people kind of want you to summarize things in a different way. But when I personally take notes, I look for a set of things, and I do always take notes. Even if I'm not having a meeting with someone, I always am curious, and I have a reading record for myself of, what did I think about that? And if I liked it, maybe I'll revisit it. If it's not even an available script, but it's a writer that I like, I'll look back, and if I ever have a meeting, I could look at these notes. So it's always important, whether you're reading for a friend or just another example of how, when you write something, it should be meant, to be read and to be made. So you better make everything really count on the page. So what I look for overall, understanding the protagonist. And we've gone over this a few times, but that's so important, because even if a movie breaks rules and a screenplay doesn't follow a typical structure, maybe it's nonlinear, or they go outside the box, you really need to understand, you as a writer need to understand your protagonist to the point where then it's a no-brainer that the person reading knows who this person is, understands their struggles, and what they're going after. So that's another clarity thing of just understanding. But then, to take it on a deeper level, what is their motivation? Why, in 8th grade, for example, we learn later that Kayla's mom isn't in the picture. So maybe her motivation for fitting in is she's maybe a little bit overcompensating because she never got, that motherly love or nurturing, and she's figuring out everything on her own. So it means a lot to her to fit in because she doesn't have someone to coach her along the way. So she's trying to figure everything out. So in other words, would the character go after X if it wasn't for Y? What motivates them? And backstory can sometimes serve as a motivation. And we'll look at a scene in the next slide, but what happened in the past that informs the future or their present. And again, with distinct, is this character distinct enough for, you know, like that time machine log line? Like, I know nothing about that character except she goes into a nail salon. So I have no idea. And it's not that you need to evoke that your character is distinct in a log line, but in the story, they need to have some type of character trait, specificity that makes them stand out, that says, that's really interesting. I've never seen that before. And you can, just because there are plots that have been done a billion times doesn't mean characters have. So that's where you can sometimes make your overall script distinct. Does the protagonist form a bond? So, you know, if they better form some type of bond with someone, because that's where the emotion comes in, hopefully. And that's, you know, sometimes servicing, you know, a character's arc is through a relationship. They start, you know, not wanting a relationship, and then they end up married because X, Y, and Z happen, but they have to have some type of bond, because that's why people go to the movies. They don't want to see someone, a miserable person, just treading through life. That would be horrible. Backstory. Intriguing readers to want to get to know your character, and explaining without saying, you know, this person has been through hell and back, like explaining in kind of less of a on the nose way why the character is the way that they are. And has your character, your hero, gone through something real or relatable that justifies who they are and what they're going for? Does the past shape who they are? Like, these are things, and I'm huge on backstory, and I'll almost always give a note on it when I, you know, I'm working on a project, because sometimes I bump on things, and that's something that I look for is, does this writer, have they figured it out, and have they answered questions about what makes the way that they act make sense, and is it logical? And I always, you know, reference, I had a logic bump there because it doesn't seem like this character would do this based on what you've told me so far. So really figuring out where they've been and what makes sense for, you know, it's also will inform your actions and your scenes. It's really important to figure out. Dialogue. Is it authentic to the time period, the setting, genre, the characters? That's, to me, the most important part. Would that character Gabe ever speak like that kid Riley? Absolutely not. He would never, you know, like take his shirt off if he weren't jumping in the pool. Like, that's something, you know, that you really need to figure out. And how are these characters distinct? They shouldn't all talk the same, because they're not the same. And the biggest bump that I have sometimes is if a script is dialogue driven and every line is just so cheesy or redundant, it doesn't move the story forward, and it really takes me out of the world that I'm supposed to be in, which is not on my cell phone, but in the script. I'm supposed to be completely in a different world. And if, you know, people always talk about like cinema as like it's a magic trick, and it is, because you're taking someone to a completely different world, and if you're doing it well, it's not cheesy, the dialogue isn't cheesy, and nothing takes you out, you're just in it. Character's arc. So we talked about this a little bit, but this is something that I look for as well, because if things aren't moving forward, then nothing is happening and the character has learned nothing. And that's not what films are about. So I'm looking for where is the character emotionally and physically at the beginning, and then where do they end up? So they shouldn't be the same. And even if it's a small lesson, some of the best movies don't have like the biggest transformations, but they definitely have, it differs. So the beginning is different than the end in some small way, but you know that they've been through a ton of crap to have that difference of experience in the end. And then same with the want. What do they want on a personal level, story level? And then who or what do they go after, and what did they learn, and what experiences make them learn and change and grow. And again, what makes a story unique? I know I've said it a billion times, but it's your job to figure out, if it's a concept we've seen before, what element can you change or add to or do something to make this stand out? You know, we all have, whether we know it or not, a lot of personal experiences to turn to when we're writing. And sometimes the hardest things to write about are the hardest things that we've been through. So even if it's a moment in your life where you're like, that sucked, those are usually the things that lean themselves to what makes, you know, your story, your screenplay the most unique and makes people keep reading because they've never seen it before. And then villain. So not all movies have a villain, and I'm not saying you need a Joker to your Batman, but you do need an opposing force, and you do need challenges, and you do need things to stand in the way of your character getting what they want. So, you know, if it's not a villain, is there a foil in someone that you have that, you know, sets the character back, that pushes them away from their goal more, figuring out, you know, what's the obstacle. And then ticking clock. That's something that I'm always curious about. And 8th grade isn't the best example because, you know, there's no project or deadline that she has to film a video for, but she is going into 9th grade, and she does know that there are more stakes in high school in terms of self-identity and self-worth and not feeling anxious. And there's more people that can make fun of you in high school usually. So she needs to figure it out. She needs to understand herself more. She needs to be comfortable in her own skin, you know, hopefully before 8th grade is over. And then stakes. That's, you can ask anyone I work with. That's something that if you don't have them, I never am a fan of like adding something in, but you really need to rethink then your script, because if there's nothing to lose, then the thing that you're trying to win, is it worth winning? Just like I showed you that example with Gabe and Riley. Like, if, you know, Kayla didn't have that bad experience and that stake of potentially doing something that she regrets for the rest of her life and kissing this asshole, who cares about that scene afterwards? You know, there needs to be something tangible that is up for grabs that could all be gone in a flash. And I reference The Farewell here, which is a great movie that really, I think the writer she really, really leans into her own life. It's, you know, based on a true story. She has a grandmother who's been through a similar experience. The motivation for the character's clear, backstory, everything about this movie is so, to me, unique and distinct and personal and emotional. And those are the things that you know, people love about this movie, because they've never seen anything like it, yet everyone has a dysfunctional family. So like I was saying at the top of, you know, the slides, like figuring out what that thing is that makes the story that you've seen before a little bit different, or your point of view is different. So she, you know, takes a classic tale that we've seen a billion times, dysfunctional family, flips it on its head and tells a really, really great, unique story. Okay, so now we're gonna look at Get Out, and hopefully you've seen this movie before.
Tell me when you found it. Come here, Chris. Look at me. Where's your mom?
She was coming home. She wasn't home.
From work. Mm. And yeah.
just sat there.
You didn't call anyone?
No.
Why not?
I don't know. I just thought that if I did, it'd make it real.
Mm. You're so scared. You think it was your fault? How do you feel now?
I can't move.
You can't move.
I can't move.
You're paralyzed. Just like that day when you did nothing. You did nothing. Now, sink into the floor.
Wait.
Sink. Now you're in the sunken place.
Man, that scene gets me every time. So again, if we could just write in the chat impressions, what you feel, maybe the information that you learned, and what you think was effective in that scene. Turning point, really strong filmmaking, sinking as hopelessness, love it. Tension is heightened, emotional tension, great. Yeah, so fear, discomfort, empathy, sympathy, yep. Fear, helpless, yep, these are all great. So from this scene and why I showed, I mean, all of this is super accurate, reveals character, exactly. So like I said, I'm a huge fan of backstory because it just shows how much you as the writer have thought about, and then it informs so much that goes on throughout the entire film. 2 character scenes can be difficult if they're just sitting out and talking. This one really had me hooked. Yep, it's really well written. Backstory is a nightmare, love it. So backstory is really what I was trying to, you know, bring home here. So we get the character, we understand who he is because of who he was. He has this incredible guilt for a moment in his life that changed absolutely everything, and he still has not come to terms with it. So we understand the character on a much deeper level. And then, of course, we get the backstory. This little boy didn't do anything, and it led to a tragedy in his life. So we understand that he still hasn't come to terms with it. He still has not made peace with that for himself. Conflict. The conflict is him not coming to terms with it, and then in the present, him being completely controlled and hypnotized by his girlfriend's mom, which is a total, like, it's tension, it's discomfort, but it's also unexpected. Like, you're going to meet a family and then all of this happens. Like, what a way to build drama. And this is what we've been talking about, you know, within this hour, just escalating the drama and the conflict. Emotion, he's literally, tears are uncontrollably flowing down his face, but it's not just the tears that make us feel something, it's the storytelling. As he's telling a story and as she's poking and digging into his, you know, his flaw as a character and what he hasn't come to peace with, we learn how much guilt he has, and the guilt really drives him as a person, you know, in the present. Access point for empathy. Everyone can relate and empathize with making a mistake in your life. I don't know one person who doesn't have a regret in their life. Everyone has something that they wish they never did, or they wish they never went, you know, to a certain place. Or of course you can empathize with someone regretting something that's this personal that then, you know, changed his entire life. Goals, he clearly, I mean, who wants to be locked into a chair and hypnotized? He wants to get the hell out of that room, but he literally can't. And then also goals, he wants to overcome guilt, whether he says it or not. He is a prisoner of his own mistakes, and he needs, you know, real help getting past this, you know, this lack of action that he had in his life as a kid. And needs, I kind of just went over that, but theme, I mean, all of this scene, seduction, she's seducing him, like, to no end. She's like, oh, sit down, like, let's talk. And then all of a sudden she starts stirring her cup of tea, and he's seduced. And, you know, maybe if she weren't hypnotizing him, he would negotiate and fight to get the hell out of there. But when he's crawling up, you know, he's fighting in his mind. He's trying to get out of this horrible experience and moment. So that's just a little bit on scene work, and really how there's so much, you know, action, and of course there's dialogue, and you learn so much about his past and backstory and maybe motivation, but there's more action than there is dialogue. And that's, you know, that's the best kind of writing, when you can get across action, showing the new information, and, you know, really having the person who's reading lean in, because I would not put down that scene. I would be like, what the heck is going to happen now? I mean, it's a great script, but it's a great movie because of that level of storytelling. So when I take notes, and like I was saying before, I keep a reading record, and everyone does this differently, but I show this to just let you know that along with everything that I've said, you know, what keeps readers reading? What am I looking for while I'm reading? I look for very surface level things that most people, you know, teach you in maybe an introductory to screenwriting class. So, you know, I write down the title, I write down the screenwriter, you know, is this a script or it's a book? What is it? Because, you know, I read a ton of IP, intellectual property, and this was a script. This is a real example. The genre, which was a coming of age script, the setting, logline, and then as I'm reading, I always write down the things that I like about it. So if I love a character, or if I think like a dialogue line is funny, I'll definitely write that down. I'll definitely be taking notes, because the truth is, you can't really know if you love or hate something until you're done. And the whole point of, you know, this webinar is to get, you know, you guys to a place where people read your script in full length, they're not skimming it, and they can give notes. So, and hopefully, you know, you get someone to purchase your script. So the pros are always important. So when you're writing, you should also know, what do you think is really strong about your script? And what, you know, maybe you're great at dialogue, but you're not great at action description. How can you work on those things? Cons. what honestly I think didn't work. Or if it's something like, you know, for this example, I said some of the beats felt a little too close to Me, Earl, and the Dying Girl. And this, like I said, it's a real script. This is a real example. And although I liked the writing, I didn't recommend this project at the time at the company that I worked at because it felt too similar. It wasn't unique enough for, you know, its time. There's The Fault in Our Stars, Me and Earl. There's tons of movies that are a little bit similar to this. And then I write comments, you know, I always am trying to just in a brief way say, this is what I really liked, and this is, you know, whether it was the theme that was really great or the character work, like what really stood out, whether good or bad. And I'll read, for example, I will read the prose as an example. So the characters are very likable, they're charismatic, the dialogue is extremely sharp, quick pace, great twists and turns that keep us incredibly invested, memorable opening scene. I told you I'm big on opening scenes, and then strong roles for actors. So I'm always looking, because the end goal isn't just to sell your script, it's to make the movie. And a lot of times when, you know, I attach myself as a producer, it's not just me working to make the script the best, you know, in the best shape possible. It's me thinking, who do I know that would make this a home run for a studio, for a financier? Which actors are in my back pocket that I can send this to, that I would vouch for? And, you know, that's huge. So making your characters well-rounded and complex, and understanding their backstory and motivations, and really giving thought to character work, so that someone like me can then call up someone, you know, or work on the characters maybe a little bit more, but have someone in mind. And that's like the biggest form of flattery. Anytime I've told someone, oh, I could really see this actor for it, they're like, oh, that's awesome, I didn't think of them, or I thought of them. Like that's when you know you're doing something right. When someone immediately is like, you know who would be great for this? Like that's what every writer and producer wants to hear, is like someone's cast suggestion, because then that means like, oh, they like this, because otherwise you wouldn't recommend, you know, whether it's a contact of yours or an idea. And so I'll read the short comments just to, and again, this is no fault to this writer, but I keep, you know, I had this as an example because and that's the other thing that some writers don't always understand, is that even if I'm not going to be the one to make your movie or attach myself as a producer, if I really liked the writing, but it's maybe too similar to something that's been made or in the marketplace, I will definitely keep your name, you know, in like on a list. Like I will think of you for a specific genre. Or I have, for example, right now I'm developing a few projects that are at a very early stage that don't have a writer attached, but it's a concept or it's a piece of intellectual property, and I need a writer. So I'm always making writers lists. I'm always thinking, who have I read that would really fit this concept or this world? And that's something to think about as well, because even if you can't sell the script that you're working on right now, it doesn't mean it's a no for an opportunity later. And I take so many generals with writers, and sometimes, you know, it's not the best fit for, you know, what I'm trying to work on my slate, or it's not, you know, the best fit for, there's someone more experienced that would get it across the finish line. But needless to say, I always take notes. I always, you know, really take time to say what worked, what didn't. And, you know, that way, as a writer, you get information, and, you know, whether you take the note or not, I take notes so that I can, you know, hopefully help in some way. And if I like it enough, give, you know, real extensive notes to get this in really good shape. So great example. So short comments. This script grabbed me from start to finish. One can't help but root for the two main characters and cling to the strong relationships this writer creates. However, this does feel pretty similar, and I'm not sure how it stands out for movies like The Fault in Our Stars, Me and Earl, etc. It's a very strong script though, and I'm curious to see if any directors spark to it. Would love to keep tabs on this writer. So, and then I have, you know, the action. So to track. So I'm going to track this writer. If I read something and I need to pass to an agent, then I'll say like, I need to call this person, or I need to give notes to this person. If I love it, I'll be like, set call immediately, you know? So I'm always very, it's because I'm not just going to read something and then never get back to someone. That's, you know, not very good. But I'm always looking for those nuts and bolts. So logline, genre, setting, all those things, and really hammering, you know, what works. Okay, so that's the end. I've talked a lot, and then I'll just put very quickly recommended viewing and reading, because even though movies are amazing and entertaining to watch, I think you also can really learn from reading scripts, and all of these scripts are very well written. So I'd recommend those. Yeah, so now I'm gonna open it up for questions.
Okay, I don't see any questions yet in the Q&A, but pop them in there, guys, if you have any. I'm glad everything went smooth. I had an adventure over here getting kicked off multiple times, but I'm glad.
Here's one. Okay, so I think besides grammar, etc., what turns you off in the beginning? You know, like I mentioned, so this is a question that says, besides grammar, what turns you off in the beginning? And Sarita asked this. So lack of clarity. I mean, that's, if something's confusing, that turns me off in no way like you've ever seen. If I have no idea where I am, if I can't like understand if there's a supporting character who's arguing with the main character, like if I can't grasp and orient myself on page one, that's really bad, because I've already started in a way where I'm trying to catch up, and then I have to reread it, and then I might even have to reread it again. And then I feel like, well, this is going to be a hard read. And you always, it's not that, you know, lighter, like comedic genres are easy to read, but you want to make whatever genre you're writing about super easy to read and accessible, so that there are no confusing parts in the beginning. What turns you off when interacting with a writer? That's from Parker. So, I mean, I hate to say this, but a lot of things. Sometimes writers will be very, very cocky, and I'll give a note and then they'll say like, oh yeah, well, I addressed that here, but they haven't even let me finish like my thought from the note. So definitely being open is one thing that I would recommend as advice. Always be open. And even if you've gotten the note before, like just appreciate that someone, whatever level you're at too, just appreciate that someone's taking the time to talk to you, to give you notes. So that's definitely a turn off if someone's cocky and they won't listen. And then the other, what else turns me off? If someone's really prickly, and this happens usually with like upper level writers, if they aren't open, again, this is just being open and listening, but if they aren't open to any notes or feedback because they just think they're the shit, like that's super annoying. And sometimes I have to work with people like that because they're at a high level and they're gonna, you know, they're a well-known writer and a studio wants to work with them, but it's very challenging when someone's just super prickly and won't, you know, do what's the best thing for the story. Like I'm always just saying what moves the story forward. Okay. Sandy says, what kinds of stories are you usually drawn to? So I love all movies. I'm not like tied just to one genre. I'd say stories about underdogs I always root for because they start at such a place. I love comedies. I love coming of age. I love, you know, story, rom-coms. The only things that I'm not like, the projects that really aren't on my slate unless they're super grounded are huge sci-fi, huge, you know, fantasy movies. Like I'm not going to be the person who makes the next Lord of the Rings. Just just to be honest. Okay. Let's see. What's the best opening scene you've read lately? Well, for this presentation, actually, I read Whiplash, and I think that script is so damn amazing. I think everyone should read it, and it's online. You could just look up Whiplash script PDF. It's an amazing opening scene. You learn so much from it. Jerry Maguire is a really good one. I'm trying to think of new scripts. One of my projects that I'm producing a script. It's kind of a two-hander, very small, contained, but really, really good, compelling opening script, and you immediately understand what this couple wants, you know, in this movie. Historicals often need a lot more descriptive narrative to establish place. How much is okay for the first few pages, just a sprinkle? So I don't want to tell you like page count or anything, because every story is different, every script is different. All I would say is do what is ever the least like amount necessary. So if you find that you're repeating, you know, that it's snowing, or that you know, there's miles of steps on, you know, leading up to a castle, like that's all you need to say to establish the scope of that town or whatever. But it's very hard because every script is different. But my famous saying is get in, get out. So whatever you can say in the least amount of sentences, because like I said, if I have a script that I just read that was like really, really long, maybe it's 150 pages and it's also a period piece, and then I read that, and then I read, you know, another historical project that is so much longer and denser, like it's gonna be hard. So get in, get out, like whatever is absolutely necessary. And one other thing that my brother actually taught me that I applied to writing and reading is when you're in the editing room and you're, you know, editing, let's say a short or a feature, whatever, you take away a few clips of a scene, and then you watch the scene and you don't miss what you just took out. That means it does not belong there. So try and play with action descriptions and take out something that you think isn't moving the read along, and then take it out. If you don't miss it, that doesn't belong there. Brian asked, in general, how do you find the scripts you read? So, you know, it's a multitude of ways. Agents, managers send me scripts. I built, you know, strong relationships with other producers, with people in the industry. So I'll usually, you know, if I'm having, let's say, a general with an executive or an agent or something, I'll ask them, you know, hey, do you have a psychological thriller? Hey, do you have, you know, a small contained coming of age script? So I ask for the things that I'm looking for, you know, on my slate now that I'm independent. But sometimes I also look at screenwriting competitions. I mean, I think that's a great place to find up and coming voices, whether I make those projects or not. Like I said, I'm always looking for new voices, because you never know when you'll find like a really, really strong voice that would be perfect for a concept that's an open writing assignment. So different ways. Sometimes I get slipped a script, which means someone sends it to you and you're not really supposed to have it. But if it's something that they know I might like a friend might just email me a script and, you know, say for your eyes only, and that's how I get it. Jem says, when looking at pilot for a TV series, how much of the full scope do you like to see up front? Is it more about investing in the characters and being pulled in by an initial trigger, or do you prefer to have a sense of the full breadth of the larger story? So I'd say character is always super important. And as long as you know, like, what it's about, and TV is very different than film, it's a whole different process, but as long as you know, like, you know, what is this going to be about, or what is the journey, what is, you know, the beginning of the journey. Like, I would point to, you know, Raw Me on Hulu, for example. Like in the pilot, you understand like, wow, this is, you know, I'm white, I'm Jewish, I've not much in common, but I understand the, you know, backstory. I understand the setting. I understand his family. So I'm understanding all of those elements that we talked about just in the pilot, and you learn or get a hint that this is a show about someone who is questioning their faith and how religious they're going to be when their family's super religious. So it's that conflict that would pull someone in. So you know that there's a conflict, you know there's, you know, a plot goal, a personal goal, and you're curious enough because of the different elements that are presented. So yeah, it's not that you would get the full scope, but investing in the character, I would say, is spot on, and setting and all the other things we talked about. Okay, so Alan said, for someone who would like to direct his or her own scripts, if possible, would you advise totally minimizing any camera shot suggestions, as for most writers, or would you recommend asking about this for their personal preference or mentioning that you'd hope to direct, or what? So if I understand this correctly, I think I would say it's all about the experience of the read, right? So like I said, I don't want to be anywhere else except for in a script when I'm reading. So, and I wanted to go by quickly, by the way. So I would say only if you have to list like a very complex scene that has to be shot a certain way, but usually I don't like to read those camera cues or directing cues. That's for the shooting script and that's for your own knowledge. I would not say that, you know, you hope to direct it unless you're sending it to someone and you're saying, you know, I wrote this script and I'd love to direct it. But I don't even know if that would be a part of the conversation beforehand. So I would say leave that stuff out unless it's absolutely essential. Like I read a script recently that says, you know, something comes in the main character's point of view, like up close, like that's fine, but nothing says like, you know, like dolly in as we push toward, you know, the left of the front. Like I don't really like that stuff personally. Suzanne asked, should stories be contained for today's market? I mean, I know I can't speak for the entire industry, but I do know that a lot of people are looking for projects that are contained enough so that when COVID, you know, when we get past this, that we can shoot and it's small enough that we could get cast and all of that stuff together very quickly. So, I mean, I personally, I'm looking for contained stuff. I'm independent though, so it's a completely different ballgame and everyone has different mandates. So if you're writing, you know, a fantasy, let's say, maybe making contained would actually help you not sell it because of today's, you know, landscape, but more so from a story point of view. Maybe that's kind of compelling that it would be more grounded and contained. But I wouldn't focus on just containing things for, you know, COVID's sake, because people are buying projects left and right that aren't contained, but they're also buying contained. So it's whatever you think services your story. So if you need big moments and big scenes and tons of characters for the genre, for whatever you're doing, I would say stick with your gut on that one. But I would say contained is probably more popular right now. Okay, is it a good idea to mention what awards you've gotten for the script in the pitching? Do you mean like if you're pitching someone live, like on a pitch fest or something, or do you mean in like a paragraph when you're sending it to someone? I'll come back to that. I'll wait for your answer before I answer. Sebastian asks, do you find that characters with subliminal goals are just as effective as characters with definitive, concrete goals? How does it affect your read of a story with a character that has a subliminal goal but hasn't transformed it into a concrete goal? I think this just goes back, I mean, I'd say make it as clear as possible. And I want to know what the goal is. I don't want to say the bigger the goal, the better, because I tend personally to gravitate towards smaller, fair movies, but make it clear and make it tangible, you know, like if it's not, if it's not there, it's not there. And if it's as small as, you know, a character wanting to learn how to swim who's 40, maybe that's a short film. You know, I don't know if that answers your question, but hopefully it does. Okay. Talking, verbal pitch, or even list on page for written pitch. So verbal pitch, I would say no. I would say if you have like, let's say you do a Zoom with someone, hopefully they've already gotten a bio that says that you've won awards or you've, you know, placed in screenwriting competitions, but I wouldn't mention it in the verbal pitch. The pitch should be about the story. Hi, I'm this person. I'll be talking to you about, etc. But I don't think you should mention your awards. They should have that information in a paragraph, and, you know, hopefully eventually when you got represented, there'll be a blurb that says, you know, Sarah has received X and you know, placed first in this screenwriting competition, and then that'll be attached in the submission. So no. List on page for written pitch, not if it's like a PDF of something. I would say in an email submission, it's okay to list an award or something like that. Okay, so I think that's all.
I think that's it. This was great.
Yeah, well, thank you guys so much. Hopefully you learned something. Hopefully it wasn't too overwhelming. Of course, thank you guys. Yeah, well, that's it on my end.
That's it on my end. Thank you so much, Jessica. This was awesome.
Of course. Okay, thanks, guys. Have a good day. Stay safe.
Bye.
Bye.